Hello, hello, and welcome to the My Sugar-Free Journey podcast. I am your host, Aaron Farmer. Today, we have got Dr. Tro Kalayjian. So, Dr. Tro is a board-certified physician, and he has lost 150 pounds to reclaim his health for himself, for his family. And he did it, of course, we hear this so often on this podcast, but he did it by ignoring the conventional medical advice and going his own way, going low-carb, going keto, and he has found a way to reclaim his health. But what makes Dr. Tro unique is that he not only has fixed his own health, but now he's in a medical practice where he is helping other people reclaim their health with fixing obesity issues and all of the other issues that go along with it. So I can't wait to talk to him. So Dr. Tro, welcome to the show.
Yeah, listen, I'm very happy to be here. We had a little hiccup coming in, but because I'm over here in the Yale system at cardiac rehab with some cardiac rehab patients, but I'm happy to kind of join in and talk with you. Very happy to be here.
Thanks. And I definitely want to talk about cardiac health eventually, because I think that you'll have a lot to say about that. But before we get into all that, a little bit of your background, because I've seen pictures of you at how big were you at your biggest?
Yeah, so about 3.5 years ago, or 4 years ago, I was almost 350 pounds, just about 350 pounds. And look, it's tough being obese in this country because of the way we stigmatize obesity. But imagine being an obese doctor. A lot of stigma goes around that. So I've been a physician now almost 10 years, and imagine all the advice and input I've gotten to, eat less and move more throughout the years, which never worked. And I found myself gaining more and more weight, probably due to the stress of residency and, board certification and becoming a new physician. I just kept gaining weight. Yep. And my wife, I remember, we had an issue with her father, and I diagnosed an aneurysm. And we were, he was really close to having a bad outcome, but he made it. And my wife posed to me, why can't you figure out what's going on with you? Are you going to be around to enjoy our kids? And this was a very pivotal moment for me. It motivated me. She turned to me in a very, kind of very safe way and said, are you going to be around to enjoy our kids?
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with my wife. She was like, because when I married her, we've been married for 25 years now, she was already a widow because her first husband had type 1 diabetes, and it basically just ate him up from the inside, essentially. And, he didn't take great care of himself. And so, she asked me if I was going to make her a widow all over again. So, I hope not. But, at the time I was 400 pounds. I didn't know what to do. She had already lost a little bit of weight going low carb. And I thought, well, let me do some research and figure out if that's the way to go. And here we are. It's probably 5 years later, lost 200 pounds and I'm still losing. I've still got about another 50 pounds I'd like to get off me. But and so a couple things I want to talk to you about. I mentioned I want to talk about cardiac health. I also want to talk about some. How old are you?
I'm mid-30s.
Mid-30s.
Yeah.
And then how tall are you?
5'11".
5'11". Okay, so we're about the same size. We started out, I was 400 pounds, you were 350. At some point, it doesn't really matter, the differences. So we're pretty close to the same size guy and pretty close to, a lot of the same journeys in our markers. So I want to talk about some of the lingering things that you've kind of seen in your body since you've lost the weight. But first, let's get into your background. Is your background in cardiac health, or what is it that you're trained in?
Yeah, so I'm a board certified internal medicine physician, which is basically like a primary care physician. I treat anybody from age 14 and up. I have in the past couple of years focused on obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, cholesterol, chronic pain, depression, and using lifestyle and diet to help people. As you can imagine, after, my wife, posed this kind of challenge to me in a safe way, in a comforting and supporting way, and I went straight to the medical literature.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened up,
Right.
my binders and notebooks and textbooks, and I started reading. And then I went to the nutrition, articles, research papers, primary articles. I read over, I want to say, near 1,000 research papers on diet and nutrition. I read over 100 books by physicians and researchers on the topic of obesity. And it was pretty clear to me, I'm an evidence-based guy. I like to follow the evidence. And when you look at head-to-head trials of one approach versus another, it always seemed like low carb did slightly better. So I said, okay,
Right.
let me start there. So it was an evidence-based approach. Now, you'd imagine I was so surprised when I found all, the head-to-head trials supporting low carb. And yet our guidelines say, eat more carbs and eat more times a day. And it was a big contrast between what we were told to do, which is eat heart healthy whole grains and, have some Gatorade and Pop-Tarts after you and chocolate milk after you exercise, and do it in moderation.
I was gonna say, but do it in moderation. I mean,
Right,
that's the important part. Do it in
right.
moderation.
And I thought to myself, well, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. The literature says, head-to-head trials are favoring low carb in the free world setting, an ad lib setting. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to follow the evidence, and then I'm following the evidence, and the weight loss was profound. But that wasn't the only thing. This whole, concept of moderation, I found that, wait a second, if I abstained from processed foods and the Pop-Tarts and the milkshakes, I was even less hungry. I didn't want to eat. So then I began to question that mantra, that moderation is a reasonable approach to weight loss. And I don't think it really is. I don't really think it's a reasonable approach to weight loss. So in any case, so I started to, the guard started to fall, so to speak, where, the guidelines and the recommended advice all started to make less and less sense. And so I went low carb. I lost, 80 pounds the first year. After I lost 80 pounds, the joints felt great. I was getting better sleep. I felt better. I said, let me go to the gym. So I started, exercising after I lost weight, after the diet was controlled. And then, right. I continued in the gym, continued with the diet, and I was able to lose another 60 pounds that year. And third year, I lost another 10 pounds. And, I'm kind of happy where I am now, at about 190 to 200 pounds, in that range.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually where I'm trying to get to. I want to get down to 190 and put on a lot more muscle. So that's great that you were able to do that. So whenever I talk to doctors, especially doctors that have done some of the things that you've done, it's usually a multi-step process. They discover that low carb works and works for them when it comes to weight loss, but usually, especially for doctors that deal with heart health, the next thing is, this might help me lose weight, but it's going to give me a heart attack eventually. Did you have to, what did your research tell you about that? Like, this was a good way to lose weight, but it might, you might jack your cholesterol levels up, give you a heart attack when you're 40. Did you have to do anything, do any mental things to get over that hurdle?
Well, look, there were some interesting studies that came out from the British Medical Journal where fat mass is directly associated with mortality. So I said, okay, if I'm losing a bunch of fat,
Exactly.
this, and my sleep apnea is resolved, and I'm no longer pre-diabetic, and my joints feel better, and I'm able to exercise, I can't imagine a world where I'm going to have more of a chance of having a heart attack now than I am going to have, kind of now on a low carb diet versus before when I was obese and eating the standard, following the standard recommendations and failing. So I think the idea here is, okay, well, what are my options? can it be, is it the standard diet and fail, you know, and just so my LDL looks great, or am I going to actually improve my life and kind of see what happens? Well, lo and behold, my LDL cholesterol improved. And if you look at my practice now, I have more than, 200, almost 300 weight loss patients. I'd say about 2/3 either have an LDL that's the same or improved. So I'm not sure that the idea that this is going to give you a heart attack is evidence-based. The problem is we don't have outcome studies telling us which is the best diet, and we need this in nutrition. Okay, we need a study that takes a very well-planned, low-carb ketogenic diet and compares it to a very well-planned, whole food, plant-based diet, and sees what happens in obese patients, obese diabetics after 5 years. Who dies more? Who dies less? Who has more strokes? Who has less strokes? Who has more diabetes complications? Who's happier? How's their mental health? So we need these outcome studies so that us doctors don't have to guess. And so, well, how did I reconcile it is your question, this potential increased risk, right? Well, I've checked my cholesterol very regularly. Okay, I've done an ultrasound on my carotid, so I'm trained in ultrasound, and I check my carotid intima media thickness. So what that is when you look at the carotid artery, if the wall of the artery thickens, it could be a sign that you're developing atherosclerosis or heart disease. So we are able to track this development, measuring the thickness of the carotid intima using an ultrasound. And so far, I've seen no increase in my carotid intima media thickness. I have several patients who've been on low carb or ketogenic or even carnivore diets who've had consistently negative cardiac artery calcium scores, okay, which is another way to monitor and predict and prevent heart disease. So I have no direct evidence that this is going to cause heart attacks. Now, when you look at the population data, which is, somebody in their ivory tower at Harvard sending, 6,000 or 100,000 questionnaires to people all over America about what they ate 6 years ago and what they ate now, meat's associated with, heart attacks and colorectal cancer. But there's really no real direct evidence that this is the case. And I have a hard time believing that's the case if you resolve your obesity, resolve your diabetes, and your cholesterol is not worsening. How is it that it's going to cause more heart attacks? Magic? So, is there some evil potion in cow's meat? So it just doesn't add up. I recognize there's some data there. I think some of the data could be flawed. What we need to make sound conclusions is outcome studies. And, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We may see that. Kevin Hall at the NIH is doing some of those studies, some pilot trials comparing these two diet modalities. And just to be clear, a lot of people say, oh, you're low carb, you're biased, you only like low carb. I actually like any diet that eliminates processed foods. So I'm very supportive of whole food plant-based diets. If patients have, strong convictions that they don't want to eat animal food, animal products, I'm very supportive of paleo style diets or Whole30 diets. I think any diet that really eliminates ultra-processed foods, okay, and any diet that eliminates or reduces added sugars, added fats, added flavors is going to be overall healthy for you. Because these companies that are making these foods, right, when you walk into a supermarket, you are being targeted, okay? And people don't realize that. These companies, Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola, Kraft, Aunt Jemima, they have scientists, engineers, cooks, physicians who are making the perfect profile of taste so you become a recurrent customer. Okay, so if you can get rid of this one thing, all right, your life will be drastically healthier. Yep. And people don't realize that when you walk into a supermarket, you've been targeted probably for your entire life by these companies. And people don't realize that. They want to make you a recurrent customer. They want you to come back and be addicted to food.
This is what I think is the chief problem with the idea of moderation is people that really espouse this idea of moderation don't understand that, my grandmother used to always have this saying that I love. She said, you can't play around a muddy creek bank without eventually falling in. And I really think that has to do with moderation, is that if you do a little bit, it's like playing around a muddy creek bank. And then eventually you find yourself with adding more and more and more of these sugary foods because they're so good at giving you that hit of dopamine. They're so good at making you feel good. They're so good at they actually change your emotions. And it's because this is a product that has been engineered to make you happy. Pringles, God, I could eat a whole can of Pringles. And it's because it was engineered to had just the right amount of salt, just the right amount of crunch, just the right amount of sugar it was always the green can with the sour cream and onion for me. And it was just, the right amount of whatever. And I could plow through, a can at a time if I wanted to.
Well, so let's talk about that for a second, because you really need to understand. So the problem with the low carb community and the low sugar community is they focused on carbohydrates. So let's take a look at the Pringles, okay, that you brought up. Am I still with you here? Did I cut out? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So
you did just a second, but it's all right.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Pringles. Well, let's take a look at the most common foods that people are addicted to. Okay, chips, fries, pizza, cookies, crackers, and cake. Okay, those are like the top 5 or 6 food addiction. If you do a Yale, at least in my practice, if I'm looking at the Yale food addiction scale, most common foods are those. So now let's take a look at that. Pizza, right? It's about equal carbohydrates and equal fat. Take a look at Pringles. It's about equal carbohydrates and equal fat, and both of those have a bunch of salt in it. Okay. Cookies, usually near equal carbohydrates, maybe a little bit more, but a ton of fat. So we can't give fat a pass either, and I'll tell you why. Particularly these added fats that Kraft and Pringles are using. They are not, they are not giving you omega-3 fats that your body needs and is craving. They're not giving you these healthy fats that your body needs. They're giving you, processed, soybean oil or these hydrogenated oils that literally do 2 things. They give you insulin resistance, and actually they worsen your glycemia, they worsen your blood sugar, and will make you more hungry in the end, okay? And they actually are endocannabinoids. They give you the munchies. They make you more hungry, okay? So carbohydrates, definitely. Sugar plays a role in food addiction. Okay, absolutely. It hits the pleasure centers. It's probably more addictive than, even caffeine or cocaine, because we need it. So it's even more of I should say we don't need it, but we use it for fuel. So it's potentially has even more detrimental effects. Okay, because we can use it for fuel. But then fats also play a key role in food reward, okay? If you combine fats with carbs, the food reward is exponential. Meaning, if you take some sugar, just pure sugar, and eat it, not so great. Take some butter and eat it straight like that, not so great. But take some sugar, melt it in butter, and melt and stir it up, and then put it on a sauce on, put it on like a cracker or a cookie, and it's going to be insanely tasty. Okay. So sugar and fat together potentiate food reward. And so how do people go about becoming obese? Okay. Now, if I ask you, I did this experiment on myself. If I ask you, do you like Greek yogurt?
Yeah.
Okay, how much skim Greek yogurt do you think you could eat if you were absolutely starving?
Like not much, maybe a pint.
Maybe a pint, right? Yeah, exactly, right. If you're starving, you fasted all day, you have it. Okay. Now let's say I added raspberries and Splenda or sweetener to it. How much are you
I can eat a lot more. A lot more.
Well, let's flip the script. let's say you took that skim Greek yogurt, you said you could only eat a pint. Okay. What happens if you added nuts and made it full fat? Probably the same.
Yeah,
Probably,
probably about the same.
you could probably eat a little bit more. The same as you did. Here's another example. Okay. Do you like grilled shrimp?
Yeah.
Okay. If I put out a plate of grilled shrimp for you, how much do you think you could eat? You know, a pound or less?
Yeah, I'd say maybe a pound.
Maybe. If
Pound.
I give you butter
Yeah,
sauce, salted butter sauce, how much do you think you could eat?
probably more.
Probably more, right?
I
If I
could
give
probably
you
go a
that's
pound and a half,
fat,
maybe
right?
2 pounds.
So if you add
Yeah.
fat, okay, you could eat more. There's a food reward there. There's a flavor profile
Yeah.
there. Now, if I ask you a question, if I gave you marinara sauce, do you think you could eat more or less?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of marinara stuff, but probably about the same.
Probably more, right?
Yeah.
Usually more. Well, I mean, the idea here is if you add carbs, if you add a sugar or carb to
Right.
something, or if you add fat and salt, either way, you could potentiate this food reward. So a lot of times in the low carb community, we focus on the sugar and the carbs. But yeah, absolutely, it's definitely necessary. It potentiates food reward. If you eliminate it, your food addiction will improve. But like I said, the most common food addiction in this country is pizza. Okay,
Mhm.
and pizza is equal carbs and equal fat. So it's not, and you know, it's pretty much, if you're talking about food addiction, it's carbs, fat, salt, and palatability and flavor.
Exactly. Since I've started this podcast, not customers, but companies will send me their product, keto shakes and this, that, and the other thing. I tried a couple of them, but I'm not a huge fan of them. And so I see this explosion in ultra processed keto friendly foods. And it makes me wonder exactly what itch are they trying to scratch? I mean, what problem are they trying to solve? The reason that most of us went to keto is so that we could eat a whole foods diet that was actually healthy for us. And yet we keep getting pushed all of these ultra processed shakes and silly, products and bars. And I mean, some of them are good. Like I used to like Quest bars because they were mostly just meat. Now I can't eat them because they're a lot more sugar in them. But all of these ultra processed, all of these food companies are getting into the keto sphere, and they're just giving us more ultra processed foods. Have you run into issues with that with your patients?
Yeah. So I know exactly how to handle this, and it's typically, so it matters who you are and where you are. Okay, so the me now is not the me when on my first year, and I'm sure you experienced this now.
Yeah.
Your diet is very different than your first kind of year into this. So the question I ask people is it helping you get your results that you want, right? So sometimes if somebody's coming off of Kit Kats and granola bars, a protein bar will help you keep that low carb framework so you can increase your ketones, so your neuropeptide YY goes up, so your CCK goes up, and that can actually help. Okay, but what about somebody if it displaces real food like a steak, eggs, I'm not sure that's really helping, right? So it depends on how it's used and when it's used. If it's used like in the setting where you're at a birthday and normally you would eat cake and instead you have a Quest bar, that's a win.
Right.
If you're, normally, in a convenience store and you would have bought a candy bar and instead you got a Quest bar, it's a huge win, right? Because it helps you maintain that low carb framework. Okay, it has high protein, so it may have some satiating effects. It won't put you on a glycemic roller coaster with your sugars going up and down. Now, well, so that's the way it can help, right? So potentially somebody just starting, well, how is it potentially detrimental? Instead of eating, a steak, if you're eating 3 Quest bars, well, maybe that's not really helping you, right? It's probably not as satiating. If I put out 600 calories of Quest bars for you, and I put 600 calories of grilled chicken, I think pretty clearly you're going to say, I can't finish this grilled chicken, but you may be able to finish those 2.5, 3 Quest bars.
Yeah.
So the question is it helping you? And the same question, you can approach it the
Oh,
what do you feel about Diet Coke? I don't drink it. Okay, I don't drink Diet Coke. All right. And the reason for that is, hold on one second, guys.
Sure.
I'm gonna put you.
Sure. So those of you that are listening to this, he is at his
Right there.
he's
Listen,
at his
I gotta cut out. Okay.
okay.
I
All
got
right.
there's an emergency I have to go to. Well, you can stay here, but I'll be back. If you wanted, whatever
Okay.
you want to do. Okay.
Well, I mean, is it going to be like a
Somebody,
10-minute
yes, somebody
emergency?
passed out. I gotta get going. Hold on.
Oh, get out of here. Go. Sorry. All right, guys, we're back, and that was an eventful break in the podcast. So thanks to Dr. Troy for coming back, and we're going to just pretend like he was saving somebody's life out there.
Yeah, not a joke. It's a day in the life.
That's crazy. That's crazy. It is. That was eventful. That was interesting. So I appreciate you coming back. Like I said, I've only got like 2 or 3 more questions to ask you, so I won't take up too much more of your time. Here's the first one, and this is these next 2 questions are really the reason why I had you on here. First question: we know that if you've got a patient, let's say a patient comes into your obesity clinic.
Yeah.
The basics of the ketogenic diet are pretty simple, okay? Stay away from sugar, stay away from grains, especially processed grains, stay away from polyunsaturated fats. Don't be afraid of saturated fat. Get some sun, move your body, be on your merry way. And you know, eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not hungry. And it's that part of it is fairly simple. However, we know in practice, if it was that simple, you wouldn't need an obesity clinic. You would just kind of give them a little business card with like 4 or 5 rules on it and hand it to them, and that would be it. That would be it. So what is it that you are doing as a doctor that you're seeing with these people that are trying to fix these issues? What are some of the pitfalls that they're falling into? What are some of the ways that you're navigating them through? Because we know weight loss is not it's not a 21-day, whatever. It's for me and you, it was a multi-year process, and that's kind of those are the C's that you're navigating when you've got these patients in your clinic. How are you doing that? What does that look like? What are some of the common pitfalls? What is it that you're doing?
Yeah. So one of the problems is that everybody's different, right? So the way you became obese is different, right? So if you, for example, this is hard and nobody wants to talk about it, but if you suffered, sexual abuse and are depressed and are eating because of this traumatic event in your childhood, there's no amount of carbohydrate restriction that's going to get rid of that. So how your brain processes and handles that is a different issue. If you have a true metabolic disorder, right, where you have thyroid issues or cortisol issues or, issues with your adrenal glands, no amount of carbohydrate restriction will really kind of address those things. So everybody's different. How you've dealt with boredom and stress your entire life, how you've rewarded yourself with food, the amount of addiction you may or may not have, these are all different. So there's no one size fits all approach, and everybody has different pitfalls. And some of the most common things I see early on is people don't restrict carbohydrates enough, and they're not aware of the hidden carbohydrates. Okay, so that's one of the pitfalls early on. So they're thinking about net carbs when really just think about total carbs, keep it under 30, and that's it. Sometimes, the sauces and the bars and shakes and stuff like that, that'll, get people, kind of keep them out of the ketotic range they want to be in. And then, but then contrast that to somebody who's like 3, 4, 5 years in, who has a weight loss stall, right? That's a completely different beast, right? Then we're talking about addressing, food hunger kind of in the meals and addressing the composition. So what happens is, over the long term on a ketogenic diet or any diet really, as you become more comfortable on that diet, there's a carb creep and there's the fat creep. Okay. Meaning that, as you make those keto desserts and fat bombs and stuff like that, you're going to be, seeing a modest increase in carbohydrates, and you're going to see an increase in the fat content of the food. Whereas maybe in the beginning you were having fish and lettuce and, salmon and vegetables and, sirloins and this and that. Now you're doing ribeyes and butter and blue cheese on the top. So, so I think what happens is, everybody's at a different place, and it's figuring out what's the problem for that person. It's so individual. So, a ribeye with butter and blue cheese may be saving grace for somebody, and it may be destroying somebody else.
Right.
So I think overall, I find most people stalling will be overdoing cheese, overdoing nuts. And why is that? Look, it's salty and savory and it tastes great. And nobody gets filled off of 3 macadamia nuts. Nobody gets filled off of 3 cubes of cheese. So the thing is we just eat more of it than we would if it was, tuna or salmon or shrimp or steak. A couple of other things is how people manage stress. So realizing that stress physiologically makes you more hungry, right? So when your body experiences an increase in cortisol due to acute stress, the stress hormones going on, your blood sugar is going to go out of whack, your hunger is going to go up. And anybody who's taken prednisone knows this. They'll tell you, when I take prednisone, I'm always hungry and my sugar is out of whack. And the reason why is because of the stress hormones. Okay. So how you handle that stress and how you handle the hunger related to stress, I think is another big pitfall. So people really need to be aware of how stress affects our hunger. I've seen people eat double the amount they do on days they're stressed versus days they're not stressed. Right. And so how are you recognizing that you're stressed? That's the time to flex your willpower, not like micromanaging your macros when you're like happy and everything's great. You need that willpower saved up so that when you're stressed out, you recognize it and you deal with that hunger. I think these are like the major kind of things that I see. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I like the idea that you're teaching people that willpower is a finite resource, because I think that's another idea that doesn't get talked about enough. Is if you're trying to willpower your way through a diet, especially one that relies on moderation, eventually your willpower runs out and you're right back to where you were. In fact, I think that's one of the strengths of a high fat diet is it doesn't require a ton or I should say it like this. All of the willpower is front loaded. So, that first month where you're transitioning, you probably have cravings. You might have to exert some willpower to get through that. But once your body adjusts, once you are fat adapted, once you've gotten through those rough, really rough cravings the first month or so, there's not a ton of willpower that's required, especially if you've done the smart thing and cleaned out your pantries and thrown away all that stuff and you're not surrounded by carbohydrates anymore. It makes life a little bit easier.
Yeah. So look, I think one of the issues is what caused the obesity? If the obesity was caused because, you're going to Starbucks and getting a caramel macchiato and, you're downing Gatorade, then, a ketogenic diet, it may help you, but it may not be like the one size fits all cure. I think that particularly in binge eating, food addiction, and people who have a hard time moderating, right? It's a no-brainer. And why is that?
Right.
Particularly these people are wildly obese, just like I was, just like you were. You don't have a stretch receptor. Your stretch receptors are gone. My stretch receptors are gone. There's nothing in that belly that's going to say you're full. I'm sure if you and we could easily kill 4 pounds of meat, no problem, right? And so, right, so our stretch receptors are gone, okay, because of our relationship to food throughout our lifetime. So then how is it that we're going to get full? It has to be hormonally,
right?
Okay, and how do you get hormonally full? It's very simple. One, you fix blood sugar, okay? And you fix blood sugar because blood sugar fluctuations are going to make you more hungry, all right? So if you fix blood sugar, what happens next? You fix insulin, okay? And there's only 3 or 4 dietary paradigms that do that. Whole food, plant-based, low carb ketogenic, or pretty much any low carb, or paleo. These are or very low calorie, which is a death sentence to somebody who has a problem overeating, right? So really you're only left with a couple of diets to choose from. And then, well, how else do you get full? Well, how does a whole food plant-based diet make you full? It makes you full because it's filling up your stomach with roughage, right? It's supposed to trigger those stretch receptors. It doesn't really make you hormonally full. There's no neuropeptide YY from your proteins and the fats. There's no CCK from the proteins and fats. So if you go on a low-carb ketogenic diet, you your neuropeptide YY is preserved, and this neuropeptide makes you full, makes you not want to eat. If I put you in front of a Chinese buffet and I inject CCK and neuropeptide YY into you, you're not going to want to eat. And these are preserved on a low carb diet that's high in fats and high in protein. So if you want to get hormonally full, okay, you fix the glycemia, you eat low carb, you eat high protein, healthy fats, and you start achieving what you're talking about, and your ketones go up. That is really what drives this. Ketones work like a drug to inhibit appetite. This is my opinion, okay, based on my observation and based on my theories, that ketones, just like they inhibit seizures, they work on parts of the brain that inhibit appetite. Okay, so I think it's these 4 or 5 factors coming into play. So you have to address, well, what's the cause? If you don't have those stretch receptors, like you and me, you have to tackle this with a ketogenic diet, in my opinion, okay? Because it's helping you the way you can be helped. Moderation will not work. Moderation won't work in that person.
And I think that goes to, because often you'll see people who were 30 pounds overweight, and they've gone vegan, or that, they've restricted calories, and they're like, look, see, this can work for everyone. And they're not, and I've said this quite a bit, the morbidly obese are a different animal. They're just, you've done things wrong. I mean, you've screwed up things in your body. You've screwed up things with your hormones. You've done some damage, and it takes, you can't just eat less and move more and lose 200 pounds.
They'll never understand that. People will never understand that. Let me tell you, they will never understand what you were saying.
Exactly.
They will never understand. These people have no idea. They have no clue. The physicians who tell you to eat less and move more, they have no clue. Zero clue. They'll never feel what you and I have felt, and they won't be able to empathize with patients. Very few of them.
Right. Well, that brings me to my next point. I don't get to talk to formerly morbidly obese physicians very often. So what have you seen any evidence of long-term damage that you think you did to yourself when you're morbidly obese that hasn't quite been set right so far?
In myself, no.
Okay.
I think that a lot of chronic disease, there's a tipping point, right? I think with some chronic disease, there's a tipping point, particularly with atherosclerosis, right? We don't have a lot of great evidence that you can take that heart disease and reverse it. I mean, there's some, studies with like the Ornish studies, but we don't know if that was just to the tobacco, the fact that they stopped tobacco. We don't have a lot of dietary and lifestyle interventions that have been proven to definitively reverse disease. And if they have proven it, like in the Ornish lifestyle, it's not clear, and I wouldn't say proven. There's some evidence that, yes, there may be some reversal. Was it the smoking that they stopped? Was it the exercise they did? So I think that, yes, there's a tipping point, and just like anything, right? If you take a tire on your car and you drive with it for 60,000 miles and it pops, can you reverse that 60,000 miles and the popping of the tire? I don't think so. There's some point where the damage is just too much. You didn't rotate them. You broke too hard. You were driving too fast. You didn't inflate them. Whatever it is, there's some tipping point. I think that most people in this country will be significantly healthier and can improve their lives no matter where they are. Okay. I think that people who are very severe diabetic on insulin probably need more help than others. I think people with sleep apnea, multiple blood pressure medication are going to need more help and supervision than others, and will need more help reversing their problems. But I do this all the time. So it's not impossible. People come off insulin. People come off blood pressure medications. So yeah, I've noticed in me, definitely improvements. But there are some people that, years and years of fat in your liver and your pancreas, right? That some of those cells are gone. Mm-hmm. Some of those cells are gone. A lot of them will come back. And I've seen it. We've seen it. Their insulin sensitivity improves as they've lost weight, even though they've been on insulin for years. Okay. So some of that will come back. But if you've had a life, 50 years of liver fat, those cells are dead. So I think, the liver regenerates, so we see improvements over time, but sometimes we don't.
And
Okay.
some beta cells can regenerate as well, correct?
Yeah, if you remove the insult, yeah, some of them can get better. If you remove it, but if the cell is dead, the cell is dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that cell is not coming back, and you have a finite amount of cells.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the cells are dead, right? Some cells are just squeezed by the fats. Some cells are just distorted by the fats that are there, and some cells are outright killed, by the fats that are there. So the bottom line is, remove the insult. Expect improvement. It may not be complete reversal in everybody. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So I wanted to. Here's the reason why I'm asking this. I was 40 years old before I lost a pound. So 40 years old, 400 pounds, big guy. The big thing that was wrong with me. I had a bunch of things wrong with me, but the one thing that really stuck with me was my blood pressure. In the intervening 4 or 5 years since I've lost weight, I've seen massive improvements in 100 different things around. I no longer have asthma. I no longer have metabolic syndrome. I no longer have a lot of the issues. However, the high blood pressure has stayed with me, and it is unbelievably resistant to. I can't. No medications will bring it down. I've tried 10 different medications. I have done without caffeine for a month. I have lowered my salt. I have raised my salt. I have taken L-arginine. I've taken magnesium. I've taken just whatever little thing that you can think of to try to adjust my blood pressure. It's stuck. The one thing that I haven't done, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, is I haven't had an ultrasound to check for blockages and say, my kidney arteries or my carotid arteries or things like that. Have you run into a case where you've seen blockages like that, that has been raising blood pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. Well, look, if I have somebody who has multi-drug resistant blood pressure, or
Yes.
somebody that's lost 200 pounds and the blood pressure hasn't changed, okay, there's an underlying cause that's not being. So look, let's look at this from a piping perspective, okay? So in your case, right? In your case, you have now, imagine how much blood vessels have disappeared, right? All those small little capillaries that cause the pressure to be so high, feeding the fat that you have lost, right? Those are all gone. So you've taken so much off the system, and yet the blood pressure is still there. Top number one cause, okay, of a reversible cause of blood pressure is underlying sleep apnea. Okay, I would make sure a patient like that had a sleep study. Okay. The other thing I would do is get a renal artery ultrasound. Okay, a renal artery ultrasound when the kidney, right? So imagine the pipe feeding the kidney, right? If it's nice and big, the kidney's like, oh, I don't need these blood pressure increasing hormones because we're getting a lot of kidney. We're getting a lot of blood to the kidney. Now, let's say you block half of that kidney, right? So now we're here, right? And you block half of that kidney. Well, what happens? The kidney is like, oh man, our blood pressure is really low. We got to increase those hormones that raise the blood pressure, okay? Because the kidney is blocked. And that's called renal artery stenosis or renal artery dysplasia. Okay, and that's quite common in people with multi-drug resistant blood pressure. So if you have somebody that lost a ton of weight and the blood pressure hasn't changed and it's resistant to multi-drugs, you have to evaluate. I would also do a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor, which is basically getting a sense of when and how often is your blood pressure increasing. Okay, sometimes it's due to, very rarely, but sometimes it's due to certain tumors that increase the stress hormones. Okay, sometimes it's due to endocrinologic issues. Okay, hormonal issues. So I would evaluate this. If your doctor hasn't done this already, if you're multi-drug resistant and you've lost hundreds of pounds basically, and your blood pressure is still the same, needs to be evaluated. Okay, it means it's not a weight issue. It's probably something underlying it. It may not be. But at 40 years young, I would not say that it's just your heart and arteries, right, that are causing your high blood pressure, which is what most doctors may say that it is. But that would not be realistic. That would not be a realistic cause.
Okay. Well, you've convinced me. I'm going to go, we'll see
Yeah,
if
I
I
mean,
can
it's
get
not
that done.
medical advice, but this is what I
Yeah.
this is
Oh, no,
what I
no,
would
exactly.
do, if
You disappeared. Well, Dr. Tro, I'm going to pause this and see if I can get Dr. Tro back. How do I? All right, we're back for just a few more minutes. Dr. Tro's laptop went out, so he's with us on his cell phone, and I just have one more question. Dr. Tro, you've been so informative, and I really appreciate you being here with us today. If my listeners would like to find out more about you, I know you've got a podcast, all that good stuff. Where can they do all that? And just tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do. Okay, so I do telemedicine consultations in the state of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So if you live in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and you have diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, weight loss, okay, I can absolutely help you. You call my office, okay, and I'm happy to help you out. And we work through telemedicine. I have over, about 300 patients now. We worked all throughout New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. I also do health coaching outside of those states. So if you're in Texas, or if you're in Minnesota and you want help with weight loss, we can help you by doing health coaching, and not necessarily medical care, but definitely we can get you to lose weight and get you thinking about certain things that you could bring back to your doctor. So you can visit my website to learn more about those programs, doctortro.com, which is drtro.com spelled out. You can catch me on Twitter, at Dr. Tro, spelled out, DOCTORTRO. Facebook, same thing. We have a Facebook group, Rockland and Bergen Weight Loss, that's got over we have about 2,000 members, other physicians, nutritionists there, helping people for free. That's all linked out on my website, so you can find that there. Podcast is Low Carb MD with Brian Lenskis, Jason Fung, and Megan Ramos. We're having a blast doing that. So it's really informative. People are loving it. So yeah, you can get me anywhere. I respond to social media. But yeah, that's about it.
Perfect, guys. Like I said, I'll let you get back to it. I appreciate you being here today, and we're going to put links to all that in the show notes. Guys, you can find that at mysugarfreejourney.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a blast. This was probably exciting, right? It's a little exciting.
It was. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Interruptions and
it's
stuff
great.
like that.
And guys, those of you that are listening, hold on. We'll be right back with some more information.